I never expected my first trip to Alaska to leave me afraid of cruise ships. I booked a 7-night sailing on the Emerald Princess because I wanted slow mornings, glacier views, and bottomless coffee refills. The ship left Seattle on Sunday, July 23, 2017. More than 3,000 people on board. I was 35 between jobs, traveling alone and craving cold sea air. On embarkation day, I stood on the open deck and watched gray Seattle slide away, while a live band played covers. Everyone around me looked relaxed. Kids chased each other near the pool, couples posed with plastic cocktail glasses, strangers chatted like old friends. My cabin was on deck 8, starboard near midship. Across the hall in 8237 was a tall man with cropped dark hair, his wife, and their 3 teenage daughters. I later learned her name was Christy. Every time we passed in the corridor, she smiled. That first evening, she joked that her girls had already eaten 2 ice cream cones each. Her laugh was bright and easy, the kind that makes you smile even if you miss the punchline. Monday, we drifted past the green slopes of the inside passage. Rain streaked the windows, but I curled into a lounge chair with a blanket and watched pine-covered mountain slide past in the mist. That night in the Michelangelo dining room, I spotted the family from 8237 at the next table. The girls argued about dessert, teasing their dad for ordering a second steak. Christy touched his arm and laughed when he pretended to be offended. They looked like any other family on vacation. Tuesday morning, we reached Juneau. I joined a bus tour to Mendenhall Glacier. Blue ice rose behind us like a frozen wave, while everyone took turns lining up for photos. Back on board, we sailed at 4:00 p.m. towards Skagway, with a scenic evening in Glacier Bay ahead. The captain announced we'd be slowing near the Marjorie Glacier at dawn. I ate dinner alone, then went to the Princess Theater for a Motown review. Around 11, I was tired enough to skip the late-night activities. I bought a chamomile tea, headed back to my room, put my phone on airplane mode, cracked the balcony door for fresh air, and fell asleep to the muffled thump of the engines and a gentle roll underfoot. A loud thud woke me sometime after 9:00 p.m. At first I thought it was a wave slapping the hull. Then I heard shouting, one male voice, one female echoing in the hallway. I checked the time. 9:48 p.m. The shouting stopped as abruptly as it had started, followed by fast footsteps and the metallic slam of a door. I listened a minute, decided it was probably late-night party drama, and lay back down. At 9:55, another noise exploded through the wall behind my head, something heavy crashing over. A heartbeat later came a scream. Not playful, not surprised. A raw, tearing sound that raised every hair on my arms. I yanked on jeans and opened my door. The corridor looked empty, but the screaming kept going, now tangled with children crying. It was coming from 8237. Cabin doors cracked open up and down the hall. A man in pajamas hurried toward the noise. Someone hit the emergency button on the wall. Then the door to 8237 flew open from the inside. One of the teenage girls stumbled into the passageway, white shirt smeared bright red. She was sobbing so violently she couldn't form words, only point back into the cabin. The next few seconds unfolded in a strange slow motion. Her father, the tall man, appeared in the doorway. Blood coated his hands and streaked his face. He stared past all of us with wide, unfocused eyes, like he'd gotten lost somewhere very far away. His mouth worked, and one sentence came out clear. She wouldn't stop laughing at me. He stepped forward. The girl backed away, still screaming for help. A nearby passenger spread his arms to block the man's path and shouted for security. 2 uniformed crew members arrived almost at once, then a third with a radio. They ordered everyone back. One led the girls down the hall. The others pushed into the cabin. For a moment I saw inside. An overturned lamp, shattered glass, bedding soaked dark. A pale foot on the carpet, motionless. The door shut. An announcement crackled over the PA. Medical team to deck 8, midship, cabin 8237. Repeat, medical emergency. We pressed against the walls while two nurses sprinted past with a cart loaded with oxygen and trauma bags. The father didn't struggle when security, Flex cuffed his hands behind his back. His eyes were glassy and strangely calm, as if whatever had just happened didn't concern him anymore. I stood frozen until a crew member quietly told everyone to return to their cabins. My hands shook so badly that I dropped my keycard twice before the lock finally beeped green. Inside, the silence felt thick. Out on the balcony, pale twilight still hovered over a black sea. In Alaska in July, the sky never turns fully dark. Low clouds glowed faint orange and purple above the distant peaks. I sat on the bed and listened through the wall. Voices, the clatter of equipment, but no more screaming. After maybe 20 minutes, I heard a different code on the crew channel, a phrase I'd later learn meant the situation was contained. I didn't sleep again. By dawn, we were gliding into Glacier Bay. Low mountains rose on both sides of the ship, their upper slopes dusted with snow. Light rain spattered the balcony glass. The ship's naturalist began her usual commentary about sea lions and caving ice, but everyone I saw looked stunned, whispering about what had happened. Rumors spread faster than the coffee line. A fight over money, a random intruder, an affair gone wrong, even terrorism. Very few knew the truth. Around 8 a.m., the captain made a formal announcement. His voice was steady but strained. Due to a serious incident last night, we have notified the FBI and U.S. Coast Guard. Authorities will board the ship in Juneau for a full investigation. Out of respect for the family involved, we ask for your cooperation and privacy. Theater, dining rooms, even trivia games went quiet as people listened. All morning, yellow tape sealed off the section of Deck 8 around 8237. Security guarded both ends. I forced down a slice of toast at the buffet, more out of habit than hunger. Faces around me looked pale, eyes flicking toward every entrance like they expected violence to spill through the doors. The three girls were kept in a staff office with a counselor. Word spread that they'd be flown home from Juneau. No one said Christie's name out loud, but you could feel her absence like a draft. At noon, heavy rain hammered the decks as we docked again in Juneau. Federal agents in dark jackets came aboard first, followed by local police. Passengers pressed to the windows, watching equipment and evidence bags roll up the gangway. I stayed away from the rail. Instead, I found an empty lounge at the stern and sat facing a wall of glass. Water streaked down the outside, distorting the view. In my mind, the only thing that stayed sharp was the father's hands, dripping red yet hanging limp at his sides. Later, I learned that the couple in the cabin next to 8237 had run in first when they heard the daughters screaming. They found Christy on the floor, head and pillows soaked dark. The girls knelt beside her, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. One neighbor dragged the husband away while the other hit the emergency button. Security restrained him within minutes, but it was already too late. Christy died before the medical team arrived. Once we regained cell service in port, my phone lit up with alerts. Utah man kills wife on Alaska cruise. News channels played the same short clip on loop. The Emerald Princess tied up at the dock, rain pouring. FBI vans parked beside stacks of luggage. The husband's mugshot appeared online before dinner, blank stare, bruises on his arms. Court filings quoted the same sentence he'd mumbled in the doorway. She would not stop laughing at me, as if that explained anything. The cruise line canceled that night's stage show, but tried to keep the other activities running. Some people still played pub trivia, still ordered Mai Tais under the covered pool roof. But everywhere I went, a hush hung over the ship, like it was holding its breath. I ordered tea in the piazza and listened to the piano player slide through soft jazz while two officers talked quietly at the next table. One sentence reached me clearly: "The kids heard everything." I left my cup half full. That night we pulled away from Juneau toward Ketchikan. The captain warned of rougher seas. Whitecaps already flecked the windows. I slid my balcony door shut, left the lamp on, and reread the same few news articles until the letters blurred. The ship groaned with each lean, the engines humming beneath it all, a sound I found half comforting, half ominous. Proof that you can pack thousands of people into a bright, camera-covered vessel and still not keep one cabin safe. Thursday morning, the sun finally broke through as we reached Ketchikan. Float planes buzzed overhead. I joined a walking tour, grateful to stand on concrete. The guide talked about totem poles and salmon ladders, but half our group walked with their eyes on their phones, following live updates from the arraignment back in Juneau. Bail denied. He'd be flown to Anchorage, then on to a federal facility. That should have made me feel safer. It didn't. The unease clung like motion sickness. Back on board, the taped-off section on Deck 8 remained closed. A housekeeping cart sat by 8237, stacked with fresh linens no one would touch. Crew members walked past without glancing at the door, professionally blind to the grief behind it. Friday, we crossed open Pacific on our way to Victoria, British Columbia. Gray waves rolled to the horizon. The theater was full for a cooking demonstration, people eager for distractions. I sat in the back and listened to pots clatter while my mind replayed the scream, the blood, the father's faraway stare. It struck me that the worst part was how ordinary it all was. No ghost, no intruder, just an ordinary man who snapped in a place built for sunsets and photo ops. Saturday evening, as we docked in Victoria's inner harbor, the captain thanked us for our understanding during what he called an unprecedented week. Bagpipes played on the pier for show, but the applause sounded thin. Many people skipped the final gala dinner. Those who went mostly wore dark clothes, like they'd stumbled into a funeral. I walked the waterfront alone, passing glowing cafe windows and clusters of laughing tourists. In my head, I kept seeing a cabin door fling open to chaos. Around midnight, the ship's horn sounded one last time, and we started our overnight run back to Seattle. I stood on an upper deck, wind burning my cheeks, and watched the city lights of Victoria fade. Below, thousands of people slept inside a steel shell, trusting thin walls and the basic decency of strangers. That trust suddenly felt fragile. Sunday morning, we cleared customs at Pier 9 in Seattle. Low clouds hugged the hills. Passengers streamed down the gangways with souvenir bags and half-empty sunscreen bottles. Reporters clustered beyond the security fence, cameras lifted. I kept my head down and rolled past them. Back in my apartment that afternoon, I unpacked slowly. The balcony outside my window overlooked a quiet side street. The stillness felt alien after a week of perpetual ship noise. I kept expecting to feel engines under my feet. A few days later, more details came out. Christy had died from blunt force trauma. The girls told investigators their parents had been arguing about the husband's drinking. Friends asked if I still wanted to cruise again someday. I said maybe, but I already knew the answer was no, not for a long time. When I picture Alaska now, I don't see glaciers or whales. I see gray water under thin rain, reflecting the hard glow of ship lights. I picture identical cabin doors, hiding lives that might be full of laughter or terror. Most travelers bring home photos of salmon bakes and ice fields. I came back with a different souvenir, a story I never wanted, a reminder that horror can walk right beside you on a sunny deck, invisible until the moment it steps through an unlocked door. Even now, if I hear a sudden slam in the night, a neighbor dropping something heavy upstairs, a car door in the street, my pulse spikes. I'm back on Deck 8, tasting that metallic fear, seeing red on a white shirt and hands held out in surrender. And I understand just how quickly any safe place can change forever. Before the next story, I should say this. I know these tailies travel through screens, but they began in real hallways and real dark corners. If you keep listening, share them with someone who thinks vacation means nothing bad can happen. Music. We sailed out of Port Canaveral on the first Sunday of March 2002. The air tasted like early spring, warm in the sun, still cool in the wind. My boss, Rebecca Carter, was celebrating 15 years as a regional manager for a medical supply company. and a cruise on Royal Caribbean's massive wonder of the seas was her reward. She brought her husband Rick, their 16-year-old son Aiden, and me, her personal assistant, because Rebecca never truly goes off duty. It was my first cruise. The ship looked unreal from the terminal, more like a floating apartment complex than anything that should move. Towering stacks of balcony cabins rose above the pier. Sail away blurred into steel drum music, rum punch, and cheerful announcements in 3 languages. At the muster drill, I stood on deck 5 beneath lifeboat 16 and tried to memorize each instruction while everyone else took selfies and cracked jokes. Rebecca grinned at me over her sunglasses. "Relax," she said. "Nothing bad ever happens on these things." Behind her, the dock slid away. The ship's horn boomed deep enough to rattle my chest. We glided past Jetty Park, families waving from the pier, and turned toward the open Atlantic. The first 2 days settled into a pattern. Monday, we docked in Nassau. The Carters paid for a dolphin swim excursion. I wandered Bay Street alone, buying cheap souvenirs and coconut water. Aiden begged to rent a jet ski, but his parents said no. Too expensive, the waiver looked sketchy. He sulked, retreated to the arcade, then reappeared that night laughing over soft serve. That was his rhythm, short tempers, quick recoveries. By midnight, he was back to raving about the Flowrider Surf Simulator on deck 16. Tuesday was a sea day. The ship already felt smaller, like a giant mall you'd memorized. I ran on the jogging track at sunrise, met Rebecca in the solarium for green smoothies, fired off a dozen work emails through patchy Wi-Fi, and still lounged by the pool. Aiden bounced between the basketball court and the teen club. He'd already found a pack of other high schoolers grateful for a little distance from their parents. We saw him mainly at meals, hair still wet from some pool or other, face pink, always promising to be back in the cabin before midnight. That promise held until Tuesday night. The ocean was so flat it looked ironed. We ate early seating in the main dining room. Salmon for Rebecca, prime rib for Rick, pasta for Aiden, which he barely touched. A girl from Colorado had invited him to karaoke up on deck 15. Rebecca rolled her eyes but let him leave after dessert. I went to the ice show, then drifted along the Royal Promenade, watching a 90s themed street party under a fake twilight sky. Around 11, I rode the Rising Tide bar, a slow, floating platform between decks, sipped 1 glass of Merlot, felt the floor gently rise and fall beneath my shoes, and decided that was enough alcohol for a work trip. By midnight, I was in my inside cabin on deck 10, headphones on, doom scrolling social media until sleep crept up. A hard knock snapped me awake. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. Then it came again, quick and urgent. My phone read 1:32 a.m. I opened the door to find Rebecca in gym shorts, barefoot, eyes wide. "Is Aiden with you?" she asked. I blinked, still foggy. "No. Why would he?" She pushed past me anyway, scanning the tiny room like he might be hiding behind my suitcase. "He never came back," she said. "Rick fell asleep with the TV on. I woke up a few minutes ago and his bed's still empty." Whatever wine was left in my system evaporated. We tried calling his phone, straight to voicemail. I shoved on sneakers. Rebecca slid into sandals. The hallway outside was dim, lit by night lights along the carpet. Far below, engines thumped like a slow heartbeat. At guest services on deck 5, the night supervisor, a compact woman named Claire, listened with professional calm. She took Aiden's full name, cabin number, last known location. "Because he is a minor," she said, "ship security must be notified immediately." She spoke into a radio and clipped phrases and codes I didn't recognize. Somewhere out of earshot, a bright star, deck 15 forward, went out over the crew channel. Passengers slept on, unaware. Security met us by the forward elevators, a broad-shouldered officer named Victor leading the group. He asked for a recent photo. Rebecca pulled up one from that afternoon, Aiden grinning by the pickleball court, hair smashed under a borrowed helmet. Victor sent it to every guard on duty. "Any reason your son might try to leave the ship?" he asked. Rebecca shook her head so hard it looked painful. He's terrified of deep water, he can barely swim. He loves the idea of the gym, I added weakly. He wouldn't miss leg day. No one laughed. They split up. Victor took decks 2 through 8 with one team. Claire went to check keycard logs for any sign of Aiden entering another cabin. Rebecca and I followed a guard named Marta toward the higher decks. We passed shuttered shops, rows of stacked loungers, silent arcade machines pulsing green and red in the dark. On the pool deck, the only movement came from towel bins shivering in the wind. The ocean's constant hiss sounded like radio static. The teen club lights were off, doors locked. A little sensor by the handle showed the last exit at 12:07 a.m. The sports bar next door had one bartender wiping down counters beneath an endless replay of an NBA game. He swore he hadn't seen a kid in a blue NASA hoodie. We combed the jogging track, the miniature golf course, the wind-shadowed corners behind lifeboats where people sneaked cigarettes during the day. Nothing. Rebecca's breathing grew ragged. He could be anywhere, she kept saying. Anywhere. We both pictured the same thing. A misstep near a rail, a stumble, black water swallowing him. Crew members fall sometimes. Passengers too. The ocean doesn't give much back. At 2:15, the security teams checked in over the radio. No one had found him. Victor announced they were moving to Phase 2, a full sweep of every public and staff-only area. Claire asked us to stay near the pool deck in case Aiden wandered back on his own. Rebecca and I stood by the covered bar, wind tugging at our clothes. The sky was moonless, an inky dome pricked by a few stubborn stars fighting the ship's glow. 20 minutes later, Marta's voice came over the radio, sharper than before. I have a possible on deck 16 forward, starboard side. Rebecca bolted before anyone could stop her. I chased her past the flow rider, around stacks of loungers, toward the open bow. The lighting was sparse up there. Islands of shadow swallowed entire sections of deck. Spray from the bow blew cold into our faces. We found Aiden near the forward observation rail, where couples posed for Titanic photos by day. He stood stiffly, hands in his hoodie pockets, shoulders raised. Beside him, half turned away, was a tall man dressed entirely in black. Black jeans, black track jacket, black baseball cap pulled low. The wind pressed the jacket flat, outlining a thin, lanky frame. Rebecca shouted Aiden's name. He jolted like he'd been shaken awake. The man in black glanced over his shoulder. In that brief angle, I saw a pale slice of cheek, dark stubble on his jaw, no logo on the cap, no name tag, just a blank shadow where his eyes should have been. We rushed forward. The stranger didn't run. He simply stepped aside, angling his body between us and the stairwell down to deck 15, then walked away, hands loose at his sides, pace unhurried. By the time we reached Aiden, the man had vanished down the stairs. I grabbed the rail to steady myself on the slick deck as Victor and 2 more guards arrived. Rebecca clutched Aiden and shook him, not in anger, but like she needed to feel his weight. He wouldn't look at her. Marta radioed a description of the stranger. Male, about 6'2", in all black, unknown nationality. Security teams broke off to check each nearby stairwell. We took Aiden inside through the solarium doors, away from the wind. His face was gray, his lips edged blue. He wasn't crying, but he trembled so hard his zipper rattled. We found a quiet corner by a towel stand. I knelt down and asked what happened. It took a long time for him to speak. When he finally did, his voice was barely above a whisper. He said the view is better at night, Aiden said. Said nobody comes up here. He stared at the tile floor. He asked where I live, what grade I'm in, if I like movies. I said I should go, but he kept saying, wait 1 more minute. Aiden swallowed. He kept looking around, he added, like he was waiting for someone else. Rebecca closed her eyes. Did he tell you his name? Aiden shook his head. Did he ask you to go somewhere with him? A pause, then the smallest nod. Down to deck 4. He said there's a door to the crew deck where you can sit right over the water. Like flying, he said. Aiden's hands balled into fists. I got scared. Then you yelled and he left. Security never found the man in black. CCTV cameras showed him and Aiden walking onto deck 16 at 12:58 a.m., then leaning on the rail. The brim of his cap always hid his face. At 2:37 a.m., he slipped down the starboard stairwell. 2 decks below, another camera caught a dark blur moving aft. Then nothing. No key card activity matched his description. No employee uniform fit what he'd worn. Housekeeping reported no missing jumpsuits or spare coveralls. Privately, Victor admitted a few passengers managed to sneak extra people on board in port, paying certain crew members to look the other way. Rare on a giant ship like this, but not impossible. Royal Caribbean logged the event as suspicious person, outcome undetermined. Aiden refused to leave the cabin again. For the remaining 30 hours of the cruise, he stayed on the lower bunk with earbuds in, watching movies with the subtitles turned up. Rebecca ordered room service and kept the curtains closed. Rick tried to joke about teen drama, but the sound came out thin and brittle. I handled the tips, customs forms, luggage tags, anything that kept my hands busy. When Wonder of the Seas glided back into Port Canaveral Friday morning, the sky was bright and ordinary. Passengers gathered in the theater with color-coded luggage tags, buzzing about flight times and traffic. Rebecca hugged me, thanked me for staying calm, promised me a week off once we'd cleared the backlog of emails. Aiden mumbled goodbye without looking up from his phone. We rolled our suitcases down the gangway past crew members who smiled and said, "Have a safe trip home," unaware, or pretending not to know, how the week had really gone for us. Outside, families posed for photos beside a giant anchor statue. Kids waved little paper flags, already begging for the next cruise. Seagulls screamed overhead. The ship loomed behind us, balconies stacked like honeycomb. Somewhere inside, maybe in a blind spot between cameras, a man in black could still be waiting, ready for the next sailing. The next curious teenager drawn to the quiet of a forward deck at night. Most passengers would never know. They'd dance at sail away, gorge at the buffet, sleep under the gentle sway of the hull, trusting bright lights and electronic key cards to keep danger far away. Sometimes I still hear the wind from that night on the bow, and the hush of endless water below the rail. Up there, freedom and risk were separated by nothing more than waist-high metal and a band of shadow where a stranger could stand unseen. Music. I booked the 5-night sailing on the Celebrity Equinox that left Port Everglades on a warm Thursday afternoon in late September 2008. After a summer of back-to-back shifts at the hospital, the idea of blue water and buffet food sounded like oxygen. Embarkation was the usual blur of safety drills, frozen drinks, and the white roar of the wake unfurling behind us as Florida shrank into haze. By sunset, we'd already slipped past Key West, its lights flickering off our starboard side. I went to bed early, determined to wring every minute out of the next 4 days. The casino crowd across the hall had other plans. Friday was a perfect sea day, nothing but cobalt water in every direction as we headed for Cozumel. After breakfast, I wandered up to deck 14. Under the glass roof of the solarium, 2 hot tubs frothed beside the pool. The ship carried more than 3,000 passengers, yet the space felt oddly quiet in the mid-morning lull. The hot tubs held half-dozing strangers in similar swimsuits, sunglasses hiding their eyes as they floated in silence. That image stuck with me, bodies suspended in bubbling blue as still as mannequins. Late that night, long after the day crowd had shuffled off to bed or the nightclub, I found myself restless and in need of caffeine. The Ocean View Cafe on deck 14 keeps coffee going for insomniacs, so I headed up. The atrium was nearly empty, just the low hum of ventilation and the faint clink of dishes somewhere far away. Near the aft stairwell, a lone crewman in a white housekeeping jumpsuit pushed a mop bucket toward the pool doors. His name tag read Lewis. I held the door while he rolled the cart through. He thanked me in softly accented English, and we ended up exchanging small talk over the smell of disinfectant and the hiss of the pool sloshing against its tiles. Outside, the stars looked close enough to touch. Out here, surrounded by nothing but water and dark, even a simple conversation with a stranger felt strangely intimate. I joked that the hot tub seemed to stay busy around the clock. Lewis paused, leaning on the mop. "You want to hear something unsettling?" he asked. He said the word like a dare. Maybe it was boredom, or maybe the quiet had thinned my usual defenses. "Sure," I said. He glanced around the empty deck and dropped his voice, though no one else was near. "2 cruises ago," he said, "first night out of port, a man died in the starboard hot tub." He didn't sound dramatic, just factual. "Cardiac arrest," he added. "That's what the doctor wrote, but for hours nobody noticed." He laid out the story in steady detail. It was April 2008. Equinox had sailed the same route. We were only 2 hours past Fort Lauderdale when it happened. A middle-aged passenger traveling with his wife and teenage son slipped away from the welcome aboard show to take a soak before bed. Security cameras later showed him easing into the bubbling water at 9:47 p.m., folding his arms along the tub's rim and leaning his head back. He never moved again. A live band was playing standards across the deck. Steam and chlorine mist curled around him. His sunglasses stayed on. His chin rested on the molded headrest. His arms floated at his sides. He looked like he'd simply fallen asleep. Between 10 o'clock and midnight, at least 6 other guests used that same hot tub. A couple in their 20s climbed in and sat less than a foot away, talking about drink specials. An older woman dipped her toes, deemed the water too hot, and left. 2 college guys wearing baseball caps spent 20 minutes comparing shore excursion prices, voices raised over the music. They floated inches from a dead man and never knew. "People don't like to stare at strangers," Lewis said. "They look quick, then away." The ship's gentle roll kept the body propped upright. Nothing about his posture screamed danger. Everything changed when Lewis's supervisor, Arjun, started his nightly closing rounds. At 12:18 a.m., Arjun tapped the tub's edge to warn everyone it was time to clear out. The younger couple climbed out and grabbed towels. The man in sunglasses stayed put. Arjun spoke louder, assuming the guy was drunk. When he reached down to nudge the passenger's shoulder, his hand sank farther than it should have. The man folded sideways and slid under the foam. Arjun shouted for help. 3 more crew members ran over. Someone hit the red emergency button on the wall. The medical team sprinted up 2 decks with a defibrillator, but one look at the man's skin and the absence of a pulse told them he'd been gone for hours. They lifted him onto a stretcher, water pouring from his cruise-lined swim trunks, covered him with a towel, and wheeled him away through staff corridors. On deck 3, starboard side, behind a door labeled Guest Services Bereavement, Equinox keeps a small refrigerated room. The morgue, Lewis had seen it twice. The staff captain and ship's doctor woke the wife and son in their cabin. Their wails echoed down the hall, but no other passengers heard. Publicly, the cruise went on. The band played. The buffet chopped and stirred. Trivia and pool volleyball continued. The line comped drinks for the family and quietly arranged for them to leave in Cozumel. Outside that tiny circle, no one knew a man had drowned an arm's length from other guests. Lewis finished, and for a long moment the only sounds were the gentle churn of hot tub jets and the distant thud of engines. My coffee had gone lukewarm in my hands. I pictured myself slipping under that same water, lungs filling, while people talked and laughed 2 feet away. I thanked Lewis, though I wasn't sure why, and went to refill my cup. Under the bright buffet lights, the story felt unreal. Back in my cabin on deck 8, though, the bed seemed to lift and fall under me as if the whole mattress remembered the sea. Sometime after 3 a.m., I gave up and opened the balcony door. Night air smelled of salt and faint diesel. The moon laid a silver path across the gulf. Down on the pool deck, 2 silhouettes lounged in the forward hot tub, heads tipped back in identical poses, both wearing sunglasses despite the dark. For a second, my tired brain overlaid Lewis's story on what I was seeing. Then one of them lifted an arm and splashed water at the other. They laughed. Alive. I shut the door and told myself to stop being dramatic. Saturday in Cozumel, we docked beside 3 other ships. A tide of tourists poured onto the pier. I joined a jeep tour to El Silo Beach, ate grilled fish under a thatched roof, and tried to shake off the unease. By sunset, we were sailing again, this time toward Grand Cayman. The captain promised calm seas. A string quartet played in the atrium. It should have felt like the perfect vacation. Around 11 p.m., I ducked into the internet cafe to email a photo to my sister. On my way back to the cabin, something pulled me toward the pool deck again. The area was nearly deserted. Most people were at the late comedy show. The starboard hot tub, the one from Lewis's story, glowed turquoise underwater, led steam drifted in slow ribbons. A lone man sat in the water, shoulders submerged, head tipped back, sunglasses hiding his eyes. He looked about 40, stubble on his jaw, wearing a rash guard with a football logo. An empty cocktail glass rested on the tub's edge near his hand. No one else was in sight. I hovered near a deck chair, pretending to check my phone. He didn't move. The only motion came from the gentle ripple of water across his chest. 5 minutes crawled by. My stomach tightened. Maybe he was just drunk. Maybe I was just spooked by Lewis's tale. But the ER nurse in me, 2 years of triaging passed out strangers, wouldn't shut up. "You good, buddy?" I called, my voice too loud in the quiet. No answer. I stepped closer through the chlorine mist. His chest rose, but barely. He was breathing. His chin slackened a fraction, no reaction. I reached out and tapped his knee. "Hey, you okay? Need medical?" His head lolled, mouth sagging open. A passing wave rocked the hot tub and his shoulder dipped lower. On instinct, I grabbed his upper arms and held him upright. His skin was hot and clammy. His pulse fluttered weakly at his neck. I slapped the red emergency button on the wall. No siren blared, just a silent alert on some hidden panel. Within a minute, 2 security officers jogged up the steps, followed by a medic in a white polo carrying an orange kit. They hauled the man under the armpits out of the tub, water pouring onto the deck. "Did you see him drinking?" one officer asked. "Just an empty glass," I said. They laid him on a towel, clipped a pulse oximeter onto his finger, and started oxygen through a mask. The medic stayed calm, hands working with practiced efficiency. The man's pulse was faint, but there. They loaded him onto a stretcher and rolled him toward the elevators. Only then did I notice Lewis standing by the rail, mop in hand, watching. Our eyes met. He gave me a small nod, like a teacher acknowledging a student who'd finally done the homework. The hot tub churned uselessly, jets forming empty foam. The next morning, the cruise director announced cheerfully that a passenger had experienced a brief medical event and was resting comfortably in the infirmary. All services and activities remained on schedule. People clapped, then went back to hunting for omelets. I thought about the family from April, packing up their cabin around a sudden vacancy while the rest of the ship marched on. That afternoon, I bumped into Lewis near a staff stairwell. He told me the man from the hot tub had a blood alcohol level of 0.26 and likely would have slipped under if no one intervened. "He will go home with a story," Lewis said. "But he will go home." We stood there a moment in the faint vibration of the engines. "How do you do this all the time?" I asked. "Work where vacation and disaster share a hallway," he shrugged. "The ocean is big," he said. "We can only keep our eyes open." On the last morning, dawn blushed pink over Key West as we angled back toward Fort Lauderdale. I drank black coffee on my balcony and watched people wrestling with luggage and color-coded tags on the decks below. Somewhere on Deck 3, the morgue sat cold and unused on this voyage. Up on the pool deck, loungers still glistened from overnight cleaning, their white straps shining like ribs. Crew members folded towels into swans and perched them on each chair so the first sunbathers would feel welcomed. The brochures don't show that narrow steel door marked bereavement. They don't list how many body bags a big ship carries for just in case. Death doesn't rearrange itself for holiday schedules. Standing there in the early light, I finally understood how thin the line really is between carefree escape and something final.